Hey there everybody and good afternoon. I wanted to do a little bit of a collection special type video today because I just did Load Runner 3D for a stream and it sucked and I don't like that game and I was, lame and everything and I was either gonna do this or I was gonna do Start All-Star Baseball 2000, but I think I'm willing to bet that All-Star Baseball has a fantasy draft, and in any case I'm gonna start All-Star Baseball first before the first stream. Instead, what I'm gonna do today is I'm gonna start what's going to definitely be a multi-part video of a collection special similar to what I did with some records and with the Wii U, and I'm going to talk about some of my PS2 games here today. Not all of them, definitely some that can be skipped over here, but basically we're going to get like A through G done here today, as you might expect, like anybody. What the fuck is with the lighting going on right now? If that helps. Maybe a little bit. Yeah, a little. As you might expect, anybody who collects anything at all for the type of stuff I do, early 2000 stuff, I have a ton of PS2. And even though I've been switching over and upgrading some of my stuff, if you see my pickups video, my pickups videos, you know that I've been getting GameCube stuff to get rid of some of the PS2 versions that I have because I'd prefer to have them on GameCube. And I still have a crazy amount of PS2. So let's just get right into it and talk about some weird and some of the different PS2 games I have. First, we're going alphabetical here, get through G, like I said. Starting first with Airblade. Actually, realizing A through G, O. Because there's a bunch of Guitar Heroes and Grand Theft Autos, I realized. And I just grabbed these stacks. Airblade. Sequel sort of follow up to a game on the Dreamcast called Trick Style, that I don't think either of these games are all that great mechanically, but I definitely remember playing the hell out of this game on a rental as a kid, and it's pretty cheap, and it is also made by Criterion, who do Burnout, particularly Burnout 3. So it's sort of it's got a story to it and everything. It's got sort of basically a lot like Jet Set Radio being ripped off by Namco with skateboarding. It's not Tony Hawk, it's not Jet Set Radio, it's not as mechanically sound or interesting as any of those games, but I remember playing the hell out of this game when I was a kid. So definitely a big, good one to have in my collection. Let's skip right to Aqua Teen Hunger Force Zombie Ninja Pro-Am. You'll see a trend as we keep going that I do a lot of weird golf games because I really like golf games. Literally bought a Golden Tee arcade 1-up. I must enjoy golf games to some extent, but this is not just a golf game, and it's basically a beat-em-up / golf game, sort of like, it makes me think of Ninja Golf from the 7800. You take your shot, then you fight your way to your ball, take your next shot. And it's not really that great for either of those things, and I'm not even a huge Aqua Teen Hunger Force fan. But the fact that this game exists makes it a must-own for me. It's golf, it's violent beat-em-up, it's cartoon, it's so weird. Have to have it. Arctic Thunder. Among the many sort of arcadey type racing games, there's definitely a lot of fun to be had with weird snowmobiles, and I don't think this game actually translates all that well to a console racing game. You can see that in reviews from the time when it came out, but I definitely remember playing this game a lot when I was a kid, and I would still probably choose to pop this game in rather than Sledstorm, which is probably better. But it's a fun game for sure, although I don't think it has a lot of lasting appeal from what I remember. But a good game to grab nonetheless. And Area 51, the follow-up basically to the famous arcade game, the light gun game. This is a full-on shooter, first-person shooter, and then they made a third game or an immediate sequel to this one called Black Site that I don't think went over very well. But Area 51 for the PS2 and Xbox is actually awesome. Very, very good. I'll say Halo-style shooter because aliens and stuff like that, and it's actually really, really weird because it's got some celebrity voice actors in it, including David Duchovny, because fucking, of course, David Duchovny is in the game about aliens. But a really good first-person shooter if you've never played it. Definitely get your hands on that one if you are like first-person shooters from that time period at all. Beyond Good and Evil, which is a game that I have kind of the opposite opinion from what I've played of it, like everybody else. I can't get into Beyond Good and Evil because the combat in it is so basic and so lame, and it sucks because there's so much about this game to love. There's so much. The story is so interesting. The characters are so well designed, and the world of it is so well made. But I just got bored with it so quickly because there is a good amount of combat to deal with in the early goings of the game, and I was like, this is it. This is so underwhelming to me, and I really need to reset, think of it differently, and try this game again, maybe on GameCube. But I do have to have this game because it's such a beloved game, and of course it's getting a sequel very soon. But Beyond Good and Evil, haven't loved that game the way that some people do, but definitely want to try doing that again. Let's see. I'll skip ahead here to Bombastic. Bombastic is actually published by Capcom, which is weird to me. It is the sequel to a great PS1 game called Devil Dice, where it's a puzzle game where you roll dice around and you match them up, and it's got all these little cute characters in here that you don't really see on the cover of this version. In Devil Dice, my understanding is that it originally came out of one of the games that were made on the Net Eurose, which was the home development kit PS1 that Sony came out with. It's a really interesting story, and then it kind of became... It's so weird that this became a series to an extent, got a PS2 sequel that was published by a completely different company. Off the top of my head, I don't remember the company that published the first game, Devil Dice, on PS1, but I know it wasn't Capcom, which is really weird. Here we have... There's definitely a lot of games on here that I haven't played at all. But this is an interesting one. I like anything pretty much for those old school, fast-paced, stylized action games. They do a lot of them now, of course. You know, the newer Devil May Cry, Bayonetta, and everything like that. But there's a lot of them on PS2, Xbox, for the reboot of Ninja Gaiden and all that stuff. Devil May Cry, the first ones, and this is Bujingai, the Forsaken City. And I really have not found out a lot about this game, but it's interesting. Anything published by Red Entertainment, this company right here, seems to have some merit to it. And just the companies that are on the cover of this game, Taito, Red, and BAM Entertainment, all of whom have definitely been hit or miss to some extent. I do, like I said, I think Red Entertainment has made some really interesting stuff, which is, they're probably the most interesting company on there to me. But I definitely have to learn more about that game, story-wise and everything, but that is the type of game that it is, and I like that stuff. Must-haves here, Burnout 3 and Burnout Revenge. I'm not really that big of a fan of the older Burnouts from what I've tried of them. I have Burnout 2, I don't have the very first one. But starting with Burnout 3 is probably my favorite driving game of all time. And basically it starts with the fact that you are supposed to crash, not necessarily supposed to be great at driving. Which is a huge help to me because I'm terrible at driving games most of the time. Revenge has its bright spots too, which is ironic that I'd say bright spots because it's really dark. But really, the be-all end-all for Burnout as a series to me is 3 Takedown, and that's even including Paradise, which is awesome as well. We have here 2 versions of Capcom Classics. This is a cover I printed for a disc only of the first version, and then there's Capcom Classics Collection Volume 2. This is sort of the ultimate example of first version has all your classics, second version has weird stuff that you won't find anywhere else, and that's what I love about Volume 2 in particular. It's got some weird stuff. I need to pop up the manual to kind of read them off for you, but it's got Quiz and Dragons, it's got... The first one has a bunch of versions of Street Fighter 2. It's got Street Fighter 2 Vanilla, it's got Champion Edition, it's got Hyper Fighting. But this one has only one version of Street Fighter 2, and it's the best one up to that point. It's Super Street Fighter 2 Turbo. This Volume 2 also has Strider in it. It also has the first Street Fighter, which is not that great of a game. Quiz and Dragons, Magic Sword, Knights of the Round, Captain Commando, super expensive on Super Nintendo. So, if you see Capcom Classics Volume 2, it's on Xbox as well. I believe it's a lot harder to find on Xbox, but it was pretty heavily produced on PS2, and you can still get it, I believe, fairly easily. Definitely get your hands on Volume 2 in particular for some of the crazy stuff that's on there. Castle Shikigami 2, such a weird series of shoot-'em-ups. Not only unique in its mechanics in that you have like literally people flying around, not just ships, and you have like melee attacks and stuff, but this game gets repackaged all the time. This series gets repackaged on the regular. If you see Mobile Light Force is repackagings of this game, which I will talk about in another video that I do on my PS2 collection, because I have Mobile Light Force 2 as well, of course. But we've got Castle Shikigami 2 published over here by XS. The first one, I believe, was also published by XS. I might be wrong, but there's also Soul Divide was published by XS as well on the PS1, and just a very weird series when it comes to how it gets brought over here. But cool shoot 'em up series for sure, mostly based around people flying around and having melee attacks as well. The two Champions of Norath games, I'm not great at RPGs, I don't play them very much, but I do like a good Western RPG in a Diablo style, and Champions of Norath and a sequel are really great. They are very popular nowadays, especially because of the co-op in them. People really want good co-op, and they want good RPGs, and Champions has all of those things going for it. So, let's grab two games that actually start with the word cold that I find both of these very interesting. They're not related at all, other than being next to each other because of that name. But we have Cold Fear, which is a game that is very, very high on my backlog, actually, because it is very, very similar to Resident Evil 4 and came out around the same time. It's got the same viewpoint. It's got a lot of things. It's actually got a similar story to both Carrier, a horror game from the Dreamcast, and Resident Evil Revelations, where it takes place on a ship, on a big ship. And yeah, it comes off like a budget Resident Evil 4, but I don't think it's like stole it directly from that in that sense. It's like it was made around the same time. And then we also have Cold Winter, which I've looked up a lot and have seemed to get the impression that this is a real hidden gem on the PS2 for first-person shooters. Looks really cool. It's published by Sierra and developed by Swordfish Studios, who I've actually never heard of, I don't think, otherwise. So yeah, I always look at the back of this game and I think, like, man, I really gotta play that, because it could be like a total hidden gem on my hands here. But I still haven't yet. But I've heard really good things about it, which is nice. We've got two of the later Crash games, one of which I got super recently, the other I've had for a long time. Crash Twinsanity. Given that it's on PS2 and Xbox, it definitely seems more appropriate to get it on PS2. Does so many things. You can watch a bunch of people's videos on Crash Twinsanity. Ant Dude definitely has one. I assume Kid Icarus has one. Cad Icarus. And those people probably have videos on Crash of the Titans too. I believe Ant Dude's video is the reason that I kind of relented and got Crash of the Titans, because it's got a lot of similarities to the Skylanders. It's kind of like Activision really, or Sierra and then Activision really early on playing with Crash as sort of the Skylanders, and then transferring that over to Spyro. It's a whole clusterfuck of everything, but it's got it's good enough from what I've heard that it's worth playing. So, I do really love Crash, so it seemed like, yeah, I might as well get that, right? And here in my hands, I have an absolute hidden gem. One of my favorite games on the PS2 is Dark Watch. It is a steampunk, gothic horror, western shooter. And there's so much to digest from that, but basically what you need to come away from is that it's a great shooter. It's got it's got a great aesthetic. It's even the story is decent. It just feels really, really cool. You fight zombies, you fight vampires, you fight banshees, you fight all this stuff with turn of the century steampunk type mechanical weapons and vehicles, and you ride horses, and oh man, this is just so cool. I really, there's so much to get into with it. It's published by Capcom and made by High Moon, who made the Deadpool game, which I think is really divisive. I like the Deadpool game. And they also assist on like Call of Duty a lot lately. But this is cool as all hell. If you haven't played this game, definitely get your hands on it. It's awesome. Another weird golf game, one that I didn't even know existed for a long, long time. This is Disney Golf, and Disney has a lot of sports games. Most of them were published by Konami on Game Boy Advance and GameCube, but this is actually published by EA, of all people. Not even under the EA Sports banner, just says Electronic Arts. Doesn't have an EA Sports logo. But the companies associated with this, it's worth noting, is EA, Disney Interactive, and T&E Soft. So T&E Soft basically took their existing golf engine and then made a Disney game out of it, which is very interesting. I haven't had the chance to play this yet either, but it is really weird that Disney Golf exists and is associated with the companies that it is associated with. So definitely something that I absolutely have to have in my collection. Dog's Life. I mean, what is there to say about Dog's Life? It is a game where you play as a dog. It's published by Hip Games, who mostly made controllers. But yeah, Dog's Life. Weird, cartoony. This is like a kusoge. This is a shit game. I'm not gonna beat around the bush with it. I think that's what this is supposed to be, and we actually got it over here, which is wild. I'm gonna let you kind of look up further videos about Dog's Life for yourself. It's crazy to me that game exists. Downhill Domination seems to be a big favorite of people lately. People remember this fondly from, I believe, a demo disc, but also might have played it originally. Incog Inc. made this. It's a downhill mountain biking game that just happens to have a really great developer behind it and a lot of really crazy, fun stuff going on with it. I haven't had the chance to play a lot of it, but I know that it's wild and it's the type of racing, like biking racing game that I would play because it's very arcadey and crazy. Drakan the Ancient Gates. This is one of those games that looks like it could be complete shovelware or it could be absolute hidden gem, and I believe most people have said that it is kind of a hidden gem. It's got that sort of mix. You fly around on your dragon. You have hand-to-hand sword combat, or you have sword combat, melee combat, and you cast spells and everything. And it's kind of that, in the hand. It could very well be a budget game, like it could be Dragon Blade on the Wii, but it's actually supposed to be really good. It's, I believe, published first party by Sony. So it's got cool stuff going on with it. I haven't really played it yet, but I do always think this game looks really cool, and I've heard good things. Another type of game that you will see a lot of, and actually I'll just grab this game too. Another game that I have a lot of is combat racing games, which I keep finding more and more combat racing games being released in the PS2, Xbox era. And I have two right here. A lot of times they were made by the same few companies. This is published by Empire and it was made by Supersonic. But Empire had their hand in this game, Drive to Survive. And it looks really budgety, but from what I've seen on the actual gameplay, it's still arcadey and fun and interesting. And then DT Carnage, which again looks like a budget title, straight up, honestly. This is a little bit later though, and I think it's got a lot going for it. I've seen some good stuff from this game. So yeah, there's a lot of these, and if I keep making videos on my PS2 games, you'll see a bunch of this stuff. And then one more weird golf game here. Basically looks like a straight up ripoff of Hot Shots Golf, and it kind of is, but it's published by Axis. This is Eagle Eye Golf, and like all the golf games that I make sure I have to have, but I haven't played it yet. But the interesting thing about this one that I found is that it has a course editor that looks pretty cool. And even though I'm not really going to use them a whole lot, I do really like course editors when they're present in golf games, because I think that's really cool that they go that extra mile to put them in. We'll skip right over here to Everblue 2. Everblue 2 is one of the games by Arika, however the hell you say their name. Arika has basically been making the same game since the late 90s when they made the first Everblue on PS1. This one happens to be published by Capcom, and then they ended up making Endless Ocean and Endless Ocean Blue World for the Wii, and it's exactly what you think Endless Ocean is, but this one's on the PS2. It's you explore underwater, scuba diving, seeing the wildlife, and looking for treasure, and all that good stuff. Deep sea diving stuff in a video game. It's Everblue 2. It's a weird one because I don't know, it just the type of game that took off for the Wii because it was published by Nintendo. The same game exists, one on the PS1, but I believe it's only in PAL, and another one on the PS2 that we did get over here, and you just don't see much. Extermination here. I feel like a lot of people have been talking about this game a lot lately, and that's why this, along with Cold Fear and so many other horror games, which is why I don't get around to them, just because I don't want to play all the horror games in a row. But Extermination is another sort of horror game published by Sony, exclusive for the PS2, and it's supposed to be really good. It takes place in basically the same setting as The Thing. It's like Antarctica. Yeah, it takes place in Antarctica, and you got virus mutating people. And what's interesting about this is that the developer is called Deep Space, and they made one other game that I know of on the PS2. It's called Hungry Ghosts, and I did get that not that long ago because I got the Swap Magic disc, and that's another interesting, really cool horror game that they made. Fatal Frame 3. I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about Fatal Frame 3. I have access to most of the Fatal Frames, even though they are one of the few games that has genuinely scared me while playing them, and I don't get very far when I try to play them. Finny the Fish and the Seven Waters. An underwater platformer with an adorable looking fish on the front. I have not really played it. It looks weird and interesting, and it's by Natsume, so it's probably the most relaxing thing in the world. Fire Pro Wrestling returns. I'm really, really bad at any and all Fire Pro Wrestling games, but that does not change the fact that I really appreciate them. Particularly this one. This Up Until World is easily the most impressive Fire Pro Wrestling game. It's got an unbelievable number of characters on the roster, and one of the interesting things is having this be published in the US. It's really fun to just go through and see all the descriptions that they gave, all these one sentence descriptions for the people that they had to change the names of, but you definitely know who they are. One of my favorite ones is for Terry Funk. I forget what they called him, but they called him as a retired, but now is a crazy dad, and that's what Terry Funk is, everybody. That's nail on the head. That is Terry Funk. Another crazy combat driving game, Flat Out 2, which is also published by Empire, yeah, and made by Bugbear, which is one of the companies I've seen on a couple of those combat racing games. Flipnik Ultimate Pinball, super interesting, cool adventure pinball game. Just not a pinball table. It's you don't play for scores. You have objectives and stuff. It's such a weird, interesting pinball game. I have a tough time describing it as more than just it's a pinball adventure. But that's what it is. This front cover doesn't do it justice because it just looks like a table. But if you look on the back, you see all the forests and jungles and space and all that. It's cool shit. Really, really cool shit. Another weird horror game with a The first one is on the PS1, and I do have that, Galarian's. And this is Galarian's Ash, which is published by Sammy Studios, who have had their name on some real trash, from what I've seen. But it's interesting to see these horror games, especially knowing that there's one on the PS1 and this is the direct sequel. And it's unlike a lot of the other horror games. It's not really that high on my backlog because I've not heard the best things about it, but it's interesting enough that I definitely felt like it was worth grabbing. Gauntlet Dark Legacy, the last really, really great Gauntlet game. Basically like Legends Plus, if you played Legends on 64, PS1, or Dreamcast. Keeps kind of the same feel, unlike Seven Sorrows, which really kind of messes it up by redoing the whole thing. Great 4-player co-op game, for sure. Genji, Dawn of the Samurai. Really funny to think about Genji at this point, because most of the understanding of Genji goes with the weird E3 giant enemy crab presentation of the PS3 sequel, which I think was Days of the Blade, I think is what it's called. But Genji used to be a really, really promising hack and slash series beginning for Sony. And then it really got forgotten, and then we got that sequel, and it was meh. So it's really been forgotten, but really weird, because this game seemed to give that series a lot of promise. And now nobody remembers it. And I will finish up today with Giants Citizen Kabuto, one of the games by Planet Moon Studios. Planet Moon Studios is awesome. They made Armed and Dangerous. They made this, and I'm trying to think of what else they made, but I really, really like that company. They're very funny. They always have character. Oh, Infected. They made Infected for the PSP. And then they kind of started making shovelware because they were like, we have kids and we want to make games we can play with our kids. And I'm like, fine. This is a weird, like, strategy, adventure. It's weird stuff, and I need to play it, but I know that it has more characters with Scottish accents, which are in all of their games. And yeah, I don't know if it's that great, but it's interesting, and it's made by Planet Moon, and I think they make a lot of like cult classic type games like Armed and Dangerous, which I really like. And that's pretty much what I have that is really worth talking about for A through GIGO for PS2. This will be probably like a 3-part video if I get to make any more stuff anytime soon, but I really wanted to cut another video today because Load Runner was just an all-around really lame stream of a lame game. I'm not going to back down from it. I don't like that game. But thank you for watching and listening to me talk about PS2 games, which I clearly have a lot more than I brought up today, but that was just what jumped out at me as what's worth talking about and what's interesting, because if I did every PS2 game, it would be 10 parts. But yeah, hope you enjoyed it and are interested in some of these games, and another 2 or 3 videos. See you later.